Hello, welcome to Conscious TV. My name is Iain McNay, and today our guest is Richard Lang. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Ian.
And Richard has written a book, Seeing Who You Really Are, and it's subtitled A Modern Guide to Your True Identity. And that's interesting. Why do you call it a modern guide, Richard?
I think because it uses techniques which we call experiments. And so it's in the spirit of modern science, really, to look into what you are, not to take on anyone else's word for it, but just to look for yourself at your own direct experience. So we call it a modern contemporary way, as opposed to a traditional spiritual way, I suppose.
It's quite empowering in one way, isn't it?
It
is. Go by your own experience.
Absolutely, yes. Yes, you're the only one that is you. No one else is you. So in that sense, no one has authority to say what it's like to be you. And I think as we grow up, we take on board what people tell us we are, which is fair enough. That's our kind of social public identity. But when you awaken to who you really are, it's not discovering more about your public identity, really. It's discovering your private identity, a kind of inner secret, a wonderful, wonderful secret.
Good. So your kind of journey started quite young. I was reading in your book that you started to investigate Christianity when you were already a teenager.
Yes.
So it was obviously an inner calling to find out more about yourself and life.
That's right. I went to boarding school with my twin brother in Yorkshire when I was 9. And there was a grandfatherly headmaster who was a Christian, but a very open-minded Christian who loved telling stories. And I think it was him that inspired me with a sense of mystery and wonder in some of his sermons. And him being a Christian, I took that route at that young age of exploring the mystery of, as I look back on it, the mystery of being alive through that form of Christianity. And then I went to what we call public school when I was 14, and the people who represented Christianity there were very sincere, but they didn't have the kind of mystical depth that I was, I suppose, used to or looking for or interested in. And so by the time I was about 16, I had kind of begun to move away from Christianity. I was deeply affected by Christianity. I wanted to be a priest, you know.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was reading a book called Honest to God when I was 15, which was by Bishop Robinson, which was a radical book at its time. So this is the kind of late 60s, I suppose. And it was all about discovering the ground of being. And finding no help really in the people who represented Christianity at public school, I started to read around other religions, including Buddhism. And I then found my way to the London Buddhist Society summer school. There was an address in one of the books. And so I went with my brother when I was 17, all the way from Yorkshire, to this summer school, where I met 2 people, actually, who really influenced me. One was Douglas Harding, and the other was a man called Dhiravamsa, who was a meditation teacher from Thailand. And I was very shy at 17, and there was a meditation class, I remember. I didn't go in. I got to the door and turned back. I was just... So, it just seemed completely another world to me. And there was a Tibetan teacher there who apparently could read your mind, and I was so scared of being around him. I thought, if he was going to read my mind, that the game is up. But one afternoon, Douglas Harding was doing a workshop, and someone said, well, why don't you go? He must have been about 60 at the time. This was 1970. I don't remember much of the workshop, but I got the point. He was, after many years, he developed these experiments I mentioned a moment ago, and he did a few of them in this workshop, getting each of the participants to look for themselves at their own point of view, really, which I did and my brother did.
Right.
And we got the point that we're not what we look like. Douglas talks about On Having No Head. That was his famous book. And
so when you say you got the point, that you're not what you look like. What did that mean to you?
Well, it's the most incredibly simple thing. It's noticing that from your own point of view, you can't see your own head, your own face. I can't see Richard's face now. I'm well aware you can see it from over there.
Right.
But my point of view is I can't see anything. My hands disappear into space. And instead of my head here or my face here, for me, there's just a wide open, boundless, aware space full of what's going on now.
And how did that affect your life at 17 years old?
Well, I remember getting back home and my mother sighing with relief to see her two sons who had not been, whisked away into a cult, because that was 1970 and Buddhism even then was rather a strange idea. But I think, what happened next was I went back to school for one more term and obviously was talking about it. But so I met Douglas in the autumn 1970, and then myself, my brother and my mother went by train from Yorkshire at Christmas time, before Christmas, to visit Douglas in Suffolk. And it had obviously made a big impression on me and David, my brother, and my mother, who wanted to meet this man. And that weekend, where there were other people there, as there usually were at Douglas's house, that kind of sorted out my doubts. And I think I just made the connection. I had awoken to my true identity. Now, I was still a pretty confused teenager, and I had a lot to work out. But I had discovered something that just thrilled me. I think it was, more than anything probably at the time, was just the thrill of being empty for the world.
So talk a little bit more about your early realization, awakening to your true identity. What did that mean for you at the time?
I don't really know now, looking back, what it meant to me. I know that when I got back to England, I went to America after Christmas, went to school there, and then came back to England, went to Cambridge, which was near Douglas's house. My 3 years at Cambridge were really spent exploring this. I spent all my time thinking about it, reading about it, practicing it. I started to run workshops myself in my room at college.
Really?
Yes. Huh. And I used to go down to visit Douglas almost every other weekend. And before I left Cambridge, when I was 21, I travelled around the States doing workshops with Douglas. I had hair down to here, and Douglas was a very proper-looking English gentleman. And he was very open-minded.
Yeah.
He recognised that it was important to me, and he was giving me experience of giving workshops. But I think one is I realised I'd discovered something that was going to be with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And I also realised that for me, I wanted my life to be about sharing this. That was just what was apparent to me. I also began to make many friends who shared this as well. Through Douglas, by the time I left Cambridge, I had dozens and dozens of friends. Douglas was a very good host, always people at his house who were interested in being aware of their true nature. Yeah. So it was a very non-hierarchical thing, not a guru thing. Once you got it, oops, I banged the microphone there. Once you got it, you had no doubt about it, and it was then, as it is still now, a question of living from that and exploring it, and discovering new things every day, really, about it.